CloudDB, shaping your new normal.
Welcome, everyone, to the 2022 APEC Database Days by Apaco UC. This is your first year having a dedicated database event, and it's an honor and a privilege to run this event with the support of 15 Oracle user groups in JUX in the APAC region. Please remember to register to as many sessions as you can. This way you will be able to have access to our replays until May 20, 2022. What that means, if you go to this agenda of the event, you can register to attend as many sessions you wish. Then these sessions will show up in your personal schedule. If you go to the attendant tab in the application and you're going to see your personal schedule, you're going to see all the sessions you are registered to, and the ones that when after they pass, 24 hours later, you're going to see the links for the replays, and you can watch the replays in your own time, anytime you wish, until May 20. I would like to say thanks to our Oracle user groups and Java user groups that made this event possible, and also to our sponsors, the Oracle ACE community, the DevRel team, and your main sponsors, Oracle Corporation and CloudDB. Now for today's session, DataGuard Deep Dive by Riaz Ansari. Please feel free to ask questions to the speaker at any moment by using the chat window on your right lower corner of your screen. And Riaz will be answering our questions at the end of the session. If you have any technical questions, please feel free to use the same chat window, and I will try to help you the best I can. Now, without any more delays, I would like to leave you with this amazing session by Riaz Ansari. Riaz, if you can just turn on your mic again, I just enable one more time that you can start and take control of the session. I will put myself in mute. You just need to turn on your mic again in the system.
Thanks, Francisco, for giving me a chance to present this paper in APAC Oracle User Group. So today we will discuss about DataGuard Deep Dive. So before going to that, this is my introduction. I am a principal consultant at Covion Consulting. I am ACE associate, and then I got ACE. I am a YouTuber, blogger, speaker, and mentor. So my hobby is to train the people and giving the presentation in Oracle technology. So today we will discuss about Oracle DataGuard. So this is the image of Oracle DataGuard. So here you can see that there is a primary database, there is a standby database, and we have redo transport, we have OracleNet, and we have database copy. So these terms we will discuss slide by slide. So the first question is arise, what is Oracle DataGuard? Oracle DataGuard is basically a concept which Oracle introduced to give the protection of your data, to give the database high availability, and to give the protection in terms of disaster recovery for your enterprise data. So basically in DataGuard, we create a copy of primary database, but that copy will be synced with the production database so that in any failure of your production, you can use this copy of the database as a production. And Oracle has given this database copy name is standby database. So we can create a production database. Suppose you have production database and you want to plan some activity, or you have suddenly production failure. So this standby database will become your production by switching the production to standby and standby to production, and it will minimize the downtime when anything happen in your database. So we can use this DataGuard as a traditional backup, as a restoration, and as a high level data protection and data availability. So basically in this Oracle Data Guard transport, redo transport you are seeing in the figure. So basically your database copy will be synced with the help of redo data. So redo is very important, and from production redo will transfer to the standby database and it will apply on the standby database. So in a production database you can create up to 30 standby database copies, and that will give you a data guard configuration. So all data guard access to the standby database, while redo being received from the primary database is applied. So this makes all standby database excellent candidates for relieving the primary database of the overhead of supporting read-only queries and reporting. So after creating the data guard, you have many options to use your data guard in your enterprises. You can use for query purpose, you can use for backup purpose, you can use to create another production database with the help of this data guard. So this is actually Oracle Data Guard, and it comes with Enterprise Edition. There is no extra license for this Oracle Data Guard. Yeah, now come to this slide. What are the types of standby database? So earlier we had physical standby and logical standby, and after that we had snapshot standby. So physical standby database is basically identical copy to the primary database, and because that are identical to the primary database on a block per block basis. So physical standby database is used by performing recovery using redo data that is received from the primary database, and from Oracle database 12c enable physical standby to receive and apply redo while it is open to read only mode. So this is the important things which introduced in 12c. So now physical standby can work for your transaction purpose as well as query purpose, because it will enable and receive the things in open mode or read-only mode. Okay, and logical standby is basically contains the same logical information and as the production database, and in this physical organization and the structure of the data can be different. So the logical standby database is kept synchronized with the primary database by transferring the data in the redo received from the primary database into SQL statement. So this is the difference between physical standby and logical standby. Means whatever the redo will transfer from the production in logical standby, it will convert into SQL statement, and that SQL statement will apply onto the standby database. Okay, and this is done with the use of log miner technology on the redo data received from the database. And the tables in a logical standby database can be used for recovery and for other tasks such as reporting and the queries purpose. Okay, but from 12c physical standby is giving this feature. So nowadays logical standby is no need to configure in the data guard configuration. Okay. And a third one which introduced is snapshot standby database. It is basically created by converting a physical standby database into snapshot standby database. Means you have physical standby, then you can convert snapshot standby database, and in that you can open and you can do your developer can do the testing and everything will be applied on the standby. And then later on when you convert into physical standby, all updation which was done by your developer, it will gone and it will again convert back to physical standby, and it will be synced with production. So this is used for testing purpose. So generally people use this for testing purpose if developer wants production environment. So snapshot standby database is a better database which developer can feel as a production, so they can apply changes over here and see the result. And after that, when you will disconnect this snapshot standby and convert into physical, all changes will go back. Okay. So the types of data guard services. So we have three types of services. One is redo transport services. Second, apply services. In apply services, we have redo apply and SQL apply, and then role management services. So what is redo transport services? Basically, it will control the automated transmittal of redo information from the primary database to one or more standby databases or archive destination. And apply services basically control when and how data is applied to the standby database. So in that we have two terminology. One is redo apply. So this is used for physical standby database, as I said earlier, and redo data is applied on the standby database by using Oracle Media Recovery. And SQL apply is used for logical standby. I already said this, and this will receive redo data first, and it will transform into SQL statement, and then it will generate the SQL statement, and that SQL statement will execute it on the logical standby databases. Then that logical standby database will sync with the production. And third term, role management services. So what does it mean? It means a database operates in one of two mutually exclusive roles like primary or standby, and role management services operates in conjunction with redo transport services and apply services to change these roles dynamically. As a planned transaction, it is called as switchover. You heard about that. And when you have unplanned operation like failover, your database fail, then you will perform failover operations. So we have two concepts, switchover and failover. Switchover is basically a plan activity. In that you will switch production to standby and standby to production. But in failover, your production gone. Now you have to switch standby as a production, and simultaneously you will recover the previous production database. And when you will recover, and after that you can make as a standby or you can make again as a production. So that is DBA choice or company requirement. Okay. Now this I just talk about switchover and failover. So switchover, as I said, it will enable you to switch the role of primary database to standby, and the chosen database becomes the primary, and the original primary database then become a standby. So this is you can use for OS or hardware maintenance. And failover, this is unplanned activity. As I said earlier, it comes when your production database fails, and then you have zero or minimal data loss, depending on the choice of data protection mode. So we will cover further what is data protection mode, and it will be initiated automatically when fast start failover is enabled. So this is the new concept which comes. Fast start failover. If you will configure, so whenever your production fail, automatically your standby will become production. So that requires some extra changes in your configuration, and then you are good to go for this feature of this fast start failover. Okay. Now this is Oracle Data Guard architecture. So if you see, we have primary database, we have redo log buffer, then below there is a log writer and online redo log file, and then archive processor, and then archive redo log file. And after redo buffer, you are seeing LNS processor, and then RFS, and then standby side you have real-time apply, that is a standby redo logs, and then archiver processor, then archive, and then you have MRP or LSP, and then standby. So this is the internal architecture of the database data guard, and in that many processes involved. So this is internal data guard concept. Okay, but now these things change in 19C. We have, instead of LS, we have NSSN or TTNN processes. That is the new naming which we used here. So what is this? There is a NSS means network server processor, and that TTN is basically your transport slave processor. Okay, so that is new terminology which is used. And if you go by primary database processor, so earlier it was NSSN, and now in 19C they had given TTNN also. So here log writer will collect transaction redo information and update the online redo logs for each synchronous standby database. If suppose excuse me, you can configure your database with sync and async properties. Excuse me. So this will help you by better picture of your data guard. Sync means whatever apply will happen on the standby production, it will goes to the standby, and after applying it will give the confirmation, and then second transaction will happen on the production. So it gives you data protection actually. So if you are using synchronization method, then LGWR pass the redo to network server sync process, which ships the redo directly to the remote file server, that is RFS process, on the standby database. And LGWR waits for the confirmation from the NSS process before acknowledging the commit. Excuse me. So this is the feature if you are using. So it will not commit until it will get the confirmation from the standby that standby has applied that transaction. But if you are using asynchronous property like async, then independent redo transport slave process TTNN read the redo from the redo log buffer in memory or online redo log file, and then ship to its standby. Okay, so other than starting the asynchronous TTN process, LJWR has no interaction with any asynchronous standby database destination. So if you are using sync, then an SSN process will be used. If you are using async, then TTNN process will be used to transferring the redo data from the production. So that is important point, and receive by the RFS remote file server process. And now what is the use of archiver process here? Actually, archiver process creates a copy of the online redo log files locally for use in a primary database recovery operation, and also responsible for shipping redo data to an RFS process at a standby database for proactively detecting and resolving gaps on all standby. So there can be 30 archiver process, but by default it is 4 actually. Okay. Now, standby database processes, we have remote file server. As I said, remote file server receive redo log information from the primary database and can write the redo into standby redo logs or directly to the archive redo log. And each NSSN and ARCN process from the primary database has its own RFS process. So that is important things. And the use of standby redo log by physical standby by using SQL and RMAN command when we configure. And ARCN process archives the standby redo log also. And MRP process for the physical standby only. And MRP apply archive redo log information to the physical standby. If you start manage recovery with alter database recover manage standby database SQL statement, so then foreground session performs the recovery. If you use the optional disconnect from session clause, then MRP background process is start. If you use the data guard broker to manage your standby database, so the broker always starts the MRP background process for a physical standby. Okay, so that is MRP process. Now, what is logical standby? This will use for logical standby only, and this LSP control the application of archive redo log information to the logical standby. Okay. Now come to how physical standby work. So this is redo apply architecture. So you can see in the figure production database, redo transport, redo streaming, redo apply, then physical standby. So data guard standby redo architecture consists of primary database, which is linked to one or more standby database up to 30, and that are identical copies of the production database, and the limit 30 standby is imposed by the log archive destination underscore n parameter from Oracle database 12.1, and the above the maximum number of destination is 31. Earlier it was only 30. So one is used as the local archive destination, and the other 30 are used for standby databases. So that is important things. And standby database, as I said, which is updated by redo, that is automatically shipped from primary database, and redo can be shipped as it's generated or archived on the primary database, and redo is applied to each standby database by using OracleMania recovery. And during planned downtime, you can perform a switchover to standby database when a failure occurs. So you can perform failover to one of the standby database, and the physical standby database can also be used to back up the primary database. So this is redo apply architecture. Now come to logical standby apply architecture. As I said here, your redo will be transformed to the standby and in form of SQL statement, and then SQL statement will apply onto the logical standby. So these SQL statement by opening the logical standby database in read-write mode, additional reporting structures such as indexes or materialized view can be created that do not exist in the primary database. So that is the difference. And logical standby also can be used to perform rolling database upgrade. That is the feature which gives you minimum downtime when upgrading to a new database patch set or full database release. So this is of logical standby. Now, if suppose your network is slow and your redo is transferring very slow, so gap will be increased. Okay, so when gap will be increased, so how it will automatically deduct the gap, and how it will resolve the this gap. So this figure is related to 19C. So if connectivity is lost between the primary database and one or more standby database, redo data that is being generated on the primary database cannot be sent to those standby database. So when a connection established, data guard automatically deduct that there are missing archive redo log files. Okay, and that is you can refer as a gap, and then automatically transmit the missing archive redo log file to the standby database by using the ARCN process. So here ARCN process plays an important role, and the database standby are synchronized with the primary database without manual intervention by the DBA. So this is automatic deduction and resolution. Now come to data guard protection mode. We have three protection mode: maximum protection, maximum availability, and maximum performance. So maximum performance is by default. So I will start from this. So basically it will give the highest level of data protection without affecting the performance of the primary database. So this is accomplished by allowing a transaction to commit as soon as the redo data needed to recover the transaction is written to the local online redo log file. So the primary database redo data stream is also written to all async standby database and is written asynchronously with respect to the commit of the transaction that create the redo. So in that there is no confirmation will transfer from standby database to production, and there is no weightage on production side from standby message. Okay, so that is a maximum performance mode. Now come to maximum availability. So maximum availability, before maximum availability, I will go with maximum production. So maximum production guarantee that no data loss occur. So how you will configure? If suppose primary for this level of protection, the redo data that is needed to recover each transaction must be written to both the local redo log file and standby redo log. Okay, to store redo data. Okay, and at least one standby database before the transaction commit. So to ensure that data loss does not occur, suppose if on a standby database, if suppose transaction is not written, so primary database will shut down and your data loss will not occur. Okay, so that is maximum protection. And maximum availability, this provides the highest possible level of data protection without compromising the availability of the primary database. What happens in that? In that, suppose transaction does not commit until the redo needed to recover the transaction is written to local redo log file and to at least one remote standby redo log. So unlike maximum protection, the primary database does not shut down. If suppose any fault occurs, and it will prevent writing to its redo to remote standby redo log. So instead, the primary database operates in an unsynchronized mode until the fault is correct, and all the gaps in the redo log files are resolved when primary database is synchronized with the standby. So the primary database automatically resume operating in maximum availability mode. So basically this mode guarantee that no data loss occur if the primary data fail, but only a second fault does not prevent a complete set of redo from being sent from the primary database to at least one standby database. So this is these three things you can configure according to your requirement. If you want maximum production, you can go with maximum production. If you want maximum availability, then you can go with maximum availability. If you want only performance, then you can go by default method. Okay, mostly people do maximum availability. Now, what is hardware requirement for this operating system? So here you can see that the hardware for the primary and standby system can be different. For example, the number of CPU, the memory size, and the storage configuration can differ, but that is not a good practice. I will not suggest. Okay, but Oracle has given the option, and the operating system for both the database and operating system binaries can be different. Okay, but I will not go with these things. If primary and standby database are both on the same server, so you must ensure that operating system enables you to mount two databases with the same name on the same system simultaneously, and certain parameter must be specified. We will see later that parameter, but that is not a good practice to on one machine you have production and one machine you have standby. So that should be on different location and different server. Okay. Now in terms of the same release or data guard software, so you must install the same release of Oracle Database Enterprise Edition for the primary database and all standby database in your DataGuard configuration. Oracle DataGuard is available only as a feature of Oracle Database Enterprise Edition. If you have an Enterprise Edition, then you can configure DataGuard. Otherwise, you cannot configure. This will not come with another database categories. Okay. So it will not available with standard edition. Okay. If you use ASM and OMF, that is Oracle Managed File in a DataGuard configuration, so you should use ASM and OMF same as primary and standby. If any database in your DataGuard configuration use ASM, OMF or both, then every database in the configuration should use the same combination. If you are using ASM for production, then you should use ASM for standby. If you are using OMF, then you should use for production and standby. If you are using both, then you can use for both. Okay. Now, what is the benefit of implementing Oracle DataGuard? See, continuous service with the use of switchover and failover between system, your business does not need to halt because of a disaster at one location. What does it mean? Suppose your production fail, you have a standby. You can enable standby as a production, and your client will connect to the new production. So you have less downtime to up your production. So that is the feature. And complete data protection, it will guarantee that there is a no data loss and provide a safeguard against data corruption and user error. So your data is validated when applied to the standby. So that is the feature benefits you will get. And elimination of the standby database. Standby database can be used for reporting and ad hoc queries, in addition to providing a safeguard for disaster recovery. And we can also use the physical standby to offload backup of the primary. And next, flexible configuration. We can use DataGuard to configure the system to your need by using the production mode and some parameters, tunable parameters we can use. And this is the centralized management by OEM 13C or cloud control, you can say. You can manage all configuration of your DataGuard. So this is the benefits we have. Now, as we said, redo data will transfer from production to standby. So which terminology it will use? It will use net services. So net services plays an important role. So you have an idea about this. Suppose if you can see in this figure, listener receive, this is a dedicated server process, is a type of service handler that the listener starts when it receives a client request. And in the slide, you can see that the listener receive a client connection request, and then listener start a dedicated server process. And then listener provides the location of the dedicated process in a redirect message. And then fourth, client connects directly to the dedicated server. So depending on the operating system and transport protocol step, the three may be eliminated. In this case, the dedicated server process inherits the connection request from the listener, and the result is the same as the network session established between the client and dedicated server process. Okay, and if the client and database exist on the same computer, then the application initiating the session can spawn a dedicated server process without going through the listener. So this is known as Bequith protocol, and it is often used when starting a database instance. So that is excuse me, net services concept. And configuring of net services is required for your arm duplication for a standby, redo transport services, role transition service, file server, DataGuard broker, and better performance. So that is the use of net services. But in terms of DataGuard, the best use is redo transport services. And when you are switch over and failover, then you will use role transition services. And when you have a gap, then file underscore server parameter will resolve the gap. This parameter will this parameter is a very important role in data guard configuration. Earlier it was file underscore client also, but it is deprecated. Now only file underscore server we use in data guard configuration. And data guard broker is the terminology in data guard, basically a command line tool which give you better advantage to manage data guard features, data guard activities. So generally people prefer to use data guard broker, that is dgmgrl command you will get, but you have to configure data guard broker, then you can use this command line tool just like as SQL tool. Okay. Yes, so understanding naming resolution, that plays an important role. So naming resolution is basically client application needs a connect descriptor to create a network session. The connect descriptor contains two components. One is location of the listener through a protocol address, also known as listening endpoint, and specific database service name or Oracle system identifier recognized by the listener. So the connect descriptor can be explicitly specified, as you can see in the second SQL statement, where everything is mentioned: address, protocol, host name, port number, connect data, service name, and in first example only London. So that is the only service name. So either you can go full description or either you can go by one naming service name. So that is used name resolution. And local naming use static text based configuration file. Directory naming use for dynamic LDAP, that is high level concept. And easy connect naming use simple hard coded strings. And external naming use third party naming services. So local naming configuration files we required. This is text-based configuration file which is stored on both the client and the database server to resolve network service name. And what is that file? That is tnsnames.ora and sqlnet.ora. So these two files will reside on client side and server side, but listener.ora will always reside on the server side. Okay. Now, if you open tnsnames.ora file, so you have the service name, then inside that you have address, protocol, host, and port, and you can also use buffer sizes limit, what should be the send buffer size limit, what should be the receive buffer size limit, and connect data. So all that you can configure in tnsnames.ora file, but better to create tnsnames.ora file by graphical tool that is Net Manager because it is very very sophisticated file. If any space exists, your service will not work. So don't use any notepad to create these files, but mostly DBA use notepad to create this file. But better practice, use graphical tools which automatically creates everything in tnsnames.ora file. Now, listener configuration files is also have this type of syntax which reside in Oracle Home Network Admin listener.ora. And this listener had description list, description, address, protocol, and if you have a specific listener, you can give by address based listener by naming of this. So there are many options to create these files. Now, dynamic service registration basically allows the database to a listener is configured basically with one or more listening protocol address, and that will be passed by to listener, and listener configuration is stored in listener.ora file, as I said. So because the configuration parameter have default value, it is possible to start and use the listener with no configuration. So in the Oracle Data Guard environment, best practice usually indicate a need to adjust the session data unit, that is SDU buffer, to improve network performance. So this is especially important on a wide area network and that has long delays. So modifying its value will require listener.ora file be created and non-default value. Okay, and these parameters will play an important role, that is DB unique name, DB domain name, service name, instance name, local name, and remote underscore listener. So these things you have to configure in your data guard configuration. And if you have static listener entries, then you have to statically specify by SID list underscore listener. So this will give you static listener configuration. So dynamic service registration allow the LREG of a database process to identify its available services to the listener without entry in the listener.ora configuration file, right? But if you are using static, then you required to enter in the listener.ora file static configuration. Okay. Now, these are the parameter which we use for DB unique name, log archive config, log archive dest, log archive dest state, archive log target, log archive trace. These are the parameter which we use to use, because database name will be same in the production and standby, and DB unique name will be different. And on the basis of DB unique name, you can find out, okay, this is the production and this is the standby. So DB unique name plays a very important role. Okay. Now, these DB file name convert, log file name convert, standby file management, and file server. So come to standby file management. This is very important parameter. You have to set as a auto. What is the benefit of using this parameter? Suppose anything added on your primary database, it will automatically add it to the standby database. If you are not using this parameter as a auto, you have to manually add the data file on the standby every time. So that is not a good practice. And file server, as I said, it will fetch the archive log for a standby when any gap happen. So this parameter is also important. And DB file name convert, log file name convert basically converts the primary database file name to the standby side if structure is different. Okay, if the structure is same, then no need to use these parameters. Okay, thank you. So that's all about for this data guard deep dive, and I hope it gives you an idea what is data guard. And if you have any questions, you can ask me, or you can write on my mail ID so that I can reply later. And the source of this PPT is Oracle doc. Okay, thank you. Yeah, Francisco, are you there?
Good. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. We have a few questions. We have Ashish is asking, what's the difference between physical and active data guard?
Okay. See, active data guard is a feature which first thing, that is additional data guard feature, and it requires a separate license. It is very costly. And active data guard means, as I said, your physical database is up and running, and you can query and you can apply transactions. So when you are using active data guard feature, so whatever happens on the production side, it will automatically same time it will apply on the standby. So that is active data guard actually.
Thank you so much, Riaz. I have a question now for Hendro Hartomo. Hi, Ahmad and Francisco. Thank you very much for delivering this topic. It's a refreshment to my knowledge about data guard. I have a question quite particular, and if you can help to answer, it will be great and appreciated much. It is about upgrading PDBs to a higher release of CDB using unplug plug upgrade method, let's say from 12C to 19C with data guard in place. My doubt is on the unplug plug upgrade PDB process, then followed by how to resume the data guard for the upgraded PDBs in the new CDB.
That is very long questions. You can write me or you can mail me. I will reply on that.
Okay, no problem. And the other from Vinod, what are the new features in 19C in DataGuard? And 21, what are the new features available in DataGuard?
Yeah, in 19C, you can enable the Oracle database in-memory column store and DataGuard multi-instance redo apply at the same time on an active DataGuard standby database. And also when flashback or point-in-time recovery is performed on the primary database, standby database that is in mounted mode can automatically follow the same recovery procedure performed on the primary. And the process of flashback a physical standby to a point in time that was captured on the primary is simplified by automatically replicating restore point from primary to the standby. And a DML operation can be performed on active DataGuard standby database. So these are the standby database 19C feature. And in terms of 21C, we have a standby result cache introduced, and in DataGuard, fast start failover callouts is introduced, fast start failover configuration, validation introduced, PDB recovery isolation introduced, and standardized DataGuard broker directory structure introduced. So these are the features which introduced in 21C. But 21C is an innovation release, so we don't need to apply on the production. 19C is the production release, so we should focus on 19C new features and all. Thank you.
Thank you, Riaz. And I have two more questions and a few more coming. How much data loss in case of a failover using DataGuard?
That depends how you configure of your redo transportation services. So that depends on the attributes which we can give in log archive dest underscore n parameter, like no delay like that we configure. So on the depends of the configuration, this data loss will occur. Thank you.
Thank you, Riaz. And how can we improve the redo apply rate on a standby database?
That depends on the calculation. First, you calculate the redo generation, and on the basis of redo generation, you can set the redo rate. So that depends on the calculation of your existing production database. I can't tell exact things about this. So that depends on your database wise, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. And how about DataGuard in OCI?
That is new things, new feature. So that is very vast about the OCI. So yes, OCI is a platform where you can use everything, but you require autonomous database for that. So you can mail me. I will give the details about this, Vinod. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's see. I have one more person writing. Let's see what's coming. Oops, looks like it canceled what was reading. All right. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to contact Riaz by email, or also can contact through for us, the organization. And the replay of this session will be available in the next 24 hours. And you can also watch the presentation again as many times as you want, and at the same to our other sessions during the event. Saying that, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Riaz, for your great session today. Riaz also has another presentation that you can enjoy a deep dive on Golden Gate tomorrow. And saying that, thank you so much again, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
And take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you.